be networked in CIS notation, and the interfaces you should be using roughly. Okay. Okay. ISR G2 devices use gigabit Ethernet interface instead of fast Ethernet. So what they're saying there is to be careful, because if you're using an ISR, this would be gigabit, not fast Ethernet. So they're interchangeable. Gives you an addressing table. What interface should be addressed? Okay, this is 347 kind of review. Alright. So cable network, configure basic IP addressing, configure static routing, including default routes. Do that. Again, 347 review kind of. Verify connectivity between hosts and routers. Okay, how do we verify connectivity? Okay. Control the administrative access to the routers. Now this is where we get into a little bit of additional security information. Anybody want to take a guess at what command does this? Service password dash encryption. All right. Okay. Configure a login warning banner. All right. Not a message of the day banner, a login warning banner. Okay. Slight difference there. All right. Configure keyword enhanced username password security. Not hard. Don't overthink it. What's the syntax? Username, S. Jones. What's the next parameter or argument? Secret. Instead of password, because secret does a type what password? What type of encrypted? You're doing that on the right track. What's the two types of password encryption that you have in a Cisco router? If you use username, S. Jones. Secret, that's one type of encryption. If you use username, S. Jones. Password, it's a different type of encryption. I'm sorry, Tracy? No, RSA encryption is used for certificates. It is used for SSH. This is just to encrypt that password in a hash. So it does two different types of hashing mechanisms, which we'll get to a little bit later. So, type 7 is Cisco proprietary. It is an unsalted hash. Okay, that's why it's so easy to crack. And if you use secret, that uses an MD5 salted hash. So obviously, that's a little bit harder to crack. Configure enhanced virtual login security. So when I talk about virtual login security, what are we talking about? What area of the configuration? What? VTYs. Very good. VTY lines. Okay, and we talked about enhanced. What do we not want to put on the VTY lines? We don't want to put a password on it. Because we're using enhanced, we want to point to what? Using a password. Configure SSH, that's where we get into RSA, Tracy. Configure the SSH client, verify connectivity. That might be a little bit hard to do, okay? So if you just look at, show SSH and see the services around you, fine. is you really can't do too much with SSH in packet tracer. If you're using regular routers or you're using GNS3, you'll be able to do it no problem. Alright, configure administrative roles. Create multiple role views and grant varying privileges. This is where you're going to work with different privilege levels for different groups of users as to what they can do. Okay? I'm only looking for a couple of examples. Like limit one user to doing just show commands. Alright? Verify and contrast. So just kind of put one username in privilege mode 15, one user in privilege mode 1. That'd be fine. Part 4, configure iOS resilience and management reporting. So, secure Cisco iOS image and configuration files. That's one single command. It's a flash command. Configure a router as a synchronized time source for other devices using NTP. So you're creating an NTP what? Server. Configure syslog support on a router. Install a syslog server on a PC and enable it. This is where you're just going to drag and drop. This will be your piece. This will be your syslog server. So therefore, this is where you would point syslog messages to for part 5. Excuse me, part 4. Configure trap reporting on a router using SNMP. Again, assume that that server is also your SNMP collector. Make changes to the router and monitor syslog results on the PC. That one you're probably not going to be able to do in Packet Tracer. Don't worry about it. Configure automated security features. Lock down a router using auto-secure and verify the configuration. I would suggest that you do that on either R1 or R3. I would not do it on R2. Because R2 is basically acting like your ISP. Okay. Well, actually, before I say that, let's go through this because it might actually tell you a little bit further down here what you're doing what router. Use the CCP security audit tool to identify vulnerabilities. Contrast auto-secure with CCP. So, with CCP, I think I refer back to Lab A, which is actually Lab 0. That's why I included it in here for that. So, guess what? Going through this, it steps you through some of the key to-dos in each section. Anytime you see this, you need to fill this document out, okay? All right, I know it's in a PDF. You can either use a PDF converter or you can copy and paste it to Word. Unfortunately, they didn't give it to me in Word. Okay, some of these should be like really stupid easy. Yes, it was successful. Right? It goes through and it kind of spoon feeds you on some of these different configurations. It'll ask you questions. How does configuring and enable secret password help protect the router from being compromised by an attack? All right. Do not write me a dissertation. 1 to 2 sentences will suffice. And trust me, if I get bored reading your answer, I'm probably not going to make one. So just 1 to 2 sentences tops. Okay, It tells you how to lock down the console port, aux port, VTY ports. It'll ask you to telnet from R2 to R1. You can do this. It will work. Caveat, what mode am I in with that prompt? Anybody? User mode. Just regular, standard user mode. I am not in privileged exec mode. That right there, kind of a typo. Right? Might not allow you to do that from standard mode. It depends on what iOS it's using. It depends on whether packet tracer is going to be a target or not. So you might want to go into privileged exec mode before you do SSH or telnet or anything like that. Okay? You've been forewarned. Alright? We able to log in, why or why not? So there's some more goodness there. Tell that from R2 to R1 again. We able to log in this time. Hit. In privileged exec mode, issue the show run command. Then we go on to task 2. This is pretty straightforward. It spoon feeds you quite a bit. Configuring a warning message. So it actually makes you do a message of the day banner. Alright, you can do it this way. I was thinking of doing it a different way, the login banner, but you can do it in MOTV as well. So let's don't need to do that. I guess it's alright, fine. So forget what I said before. Investigate the options of the username command. Create a new user account using the username command. Again, create a third account. This time use the secret command. Alright. Primary reason to do this lab is to answer all of these questions. Alright. As you can see, it's kind of lengthy, but it tells you pretty much everything you need to do. Now, if you want to go through and do some of this yourself on your own without having to go through these steps, by all means, challenge yourself, knock yourself out. You know, that's fine. But I am looking for this document to come back to me with the answer to those questions. Okay, along with your packet tracer file. Along with your packet tracer file. Okay, yes?
You're using packet tracer as a GNS3?
Excuse me. I'm sorry. Along with your config files of your router. Along with the config files of your router. I'm sorry, I'm still in CIS 347. Along with the configuration files, please, for the love of all that is holy, or whatever you subscribe to, do not zip your text files. Your text files are all of like 2 or 3K. Please don't zip your text files. It just takes me extra time to dig into them and bring them up. Alright? And I know I'll have at least half a dozen to get able to do it. But please don't zip your text files, because you're not really getting any additional compression on them anyway. Alright? So I'll be looking for the config file of R1, R2, R3, switch 1, switch 3. Actually, I don't think we even go through switches here, do we? No, we don't. So these can just be standard Ethernet switches that you pull down in GNS3. They're not even really used. You don't have to use fast Ethernet 6 or 18 or whatever. It can be anything. Okay, so those virtual switches that you see in GNS3, don't worry about it. Primarily just working with R1, R2, and R3. That's the only thing I need. My little web menu page here, you go to iOS ASA. For the purposes of lab 1, all you need is this 3745 Advanced Security K9 iOS for your route. Okay. The what? Not yet. Not yet. You know, I'm going to get to the ASA, I don't think, until like lab 3 or 4. Yeah. So once that downloads, go ahead and execute it. And actually, I want to go back here and find my iOS image. That. I like putting this in a new folder and pointing everything. Paste up there. Back to GNS3. Next, agree. Yeah, why not? I don't like Super Putty, per se. Windows GUI application allows Putty SSH client to be opened in tabs. I'll pass.
It's putty with tabs, basically.
Yeah, I know, I don't like it. Destination folder, accept. Next, I agree. Switch and install WinPCap. I like i7s. Fast. Next. Yeah, Wireshark. Why not? We'll use it at a later date and time. Next. Finish. Dynamics, all the Python code. Not so much. You basically just do a default install. No spam guarantee. Dude, everything else comes to that account, so why not? Alright. And then I'm going to start GNS3 once I'm done. Launches. So you still need to go through these 3 configuration steps. You got to configure the path to your OS images, iOS, QEMU, PIX, etc., ASA. Check that the path to Dynamips and working directory do work. And add 1 or more uncompressed iOS images. So step number 1. With this, in general settings, what we want to do here is look at our project directory and our OS, our iOS image directory. I'm going to change these. C:\temp. and c:\temp /ios. Okay, don't change the configuration file. That like really goofs stuff up. So bad. Under Dynamips, keep everything the same. Click test settings. Green is good. Okay, you don't have to worry about capture files at this point in time. We'll worry about Quamu a little bit later, and I don't use VirtualBox. So I'll click apply. Okay. Check the path that Dynamips and allow working directory when they're valid. We already did that. So I need to add my iOS image. So I need to locate my image file. It opens up that directory I already had. And I select that bin file that I downloaded from my site and put it in that directory. Okay. Yeah, that actually makes things a little bit more efficient if you want to compress it. And it automatically sees what the model is and the model number. Don't worry about the idle PC. I'll show you how to do that here in a little bit. You can change the default RAM on this if you like. It's not necessary at this point in time. Okay? And once all that's done, you come down here to the Save button. You have to hit Save. And that comes up there. That's all you're looking for. Click Close. Click OK, and you're ready to go. So up here, under Browse Routers, you will only have one router to choose from, the 3700. Select it, drag and drop it. Now, if you remember your topology from your lab, okay? If you remember your topology from your lab, here's what you do. You need to configure all three of these routers so that they have a serial card and they can do serial communication. So you right click and you click configure. So I can configure all three routers at once. If I come up here to highlight router C3700, I need to go to the slots tab, and in slot 1 I need to put an NM4T card into it. Apply. Okay. Now if I take my cursor and I move it over any one of these, I see that I have those 4 serial interfaces. Right? On all 3 routers. Okay. I see that I have serial 000 to 000, 001 to 001 in my example. So, to connect these guys, I go up to my connector tool. I'm sorry.
It's on the left.
They changed everything around, didn't they?
Halfway down on the left.
Yeah, right here. I'm sorry. Add a link. And I can right click, alright, or left click, it's changed. So I'm going to use serial 10, because it didn't allow me to do 0001, to serial 10, And if this comes up for Dynamips, go ahead and click Allow Access. And then 1.1 on R2 to 1.1 on R3. Alright, when I'm done, I come back over here and I hit stop and I get my cursor back. Now, I need to add a couple of switches. An Ethernet switch here, and an Ethernet switch here. Alright? I don't really care which port goes where in this diagram. Alright? That's not that big of a deal. Come back here to the connector tool. And I'm going to use F00 to, say, port 1. And F00 to port 1. Shrink this down a little bit. Shrink this down a little bit. All up. Give myself a little room. Okay. Now, if I come over here to In Devices, I don't know how the latest version of GNS3 is going to work with this. I'm used to using a cloud. I will click and drag the cloud over. For both of these. And that's going to represent my PC and my server. So what I need to do there before I connect these devices is I need to right click on each cloud and click Configure. And under my generic Ethernet, okay, I need to configure I need to configure a VMware network adapter. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and use my VMnet. Let's see which one's host. My VMnet 1 adapter. Add that. And then here on Cloud 2, I'm going to configure like my local area network connection and add that. Alright, now to make this a little bit simpler so I can recognize what in the world's going to be what, I can right click this and change the symbol. So I can make this a server. And I can change symbol here and just make this a PC. Save my computer. Now I can connect them to there we go. Now, here's the key thing to know about those two hosts. You have to configure your VMware connection in your VMware manager, and you have to configure some routing in your Microsoft host in order for full connectivity to take place. I'll go over that on Wednesday, okay, because I want to get to idle PC. So once I have all these routers and all my topology and done and everything else, you know, I want to save this. So I'm going to save project as CIS 467 BRB Lab 1. Okay. Please take note of that. Put your initials. I don't care if you do first initial, last initial, middle initial, last initial. Something that I know it's you. Because one thing I do, I mean, look around the room, how many people there are. When I start grading labs, and this has happened before, and I hate it when that happens, but I'll grade your lab, and you did really junky, but instead of grading your lab, I grade his lab, and he got an A. So guess what? You got an A too. You lucked out. Woohoo! Score! Or what happens, more often than not, I got his lab, and I graded it and I thought it was your lab and you failed, and then you're like at my office hours like screaming at me. Right? It happens. So please put this down as your, save it under your initials. So if there's ever any question whatsoever, we go back to your config files. I go, pull up your project. And I know it's yours. I know it's not his that you were working off of. Alright, it keeps everybody honest. Tries to keep everybody honest. Alright, save NVRAMs. You don't need to use about this because you're not using firewall. Don't worry about save traffic capture, so just NVRAMs. Okay. Alright. This is really important. You want to make sure that all three of these config files land in the proper directory. Okay? Because this is what you're going to turn in, these three CFG files, when you're all done configuring everything. Alright? So if you get an error right here when you do that, you goof something up. Go back and rewatch the tape if you're recording this. Or get somebody who did record it, watch their tape. These routers, and this works kind of like VMware. You got the play button turns them on.
You don't have to select it anymore. It just does it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm old school that way. I still select it.
And then your computer starts smoking.
My computer's not smoking. Smoking crack. Funny. Not responding. And this is why we save the configuration
Before you started.
Okay, so it's all started. Perfect. So as these things are booting up, in order for me to get into the console of one of them, if I right click and I go to console, that will pull up a putty session of all the devices. So I'm just going to go to R1. Alright. Do a show run. Alright. Everything's there. And what I'd like to do now is kind of bring up Task Manager and look at process performance. So those of you who can see this, you can see my CPU loads at about 30%, and I got an i7 and decent amount of, I got 8 gigs of RAM, and that's fine. It's working pretty good. So I want to at least do some, show commands on this, run through it so it can sample the CPU cycles of the hypervisor that's running these routers. What I'm going to do next is, the reason my CPU load is so high is because it's interpreting idle cycles in the hypervisor of these routers instead of quelching the idle cycles. If that makes any sense? No? No? Okay. So basically what the architecture of my box is it is interpreting any cycle in the hypervisor that is basically the virtual CPU of that router as an actual task. Okay? And because the way a CPU works at a very, very, very high level is even if nothing is happening, there's an idle cycle, meaning it's just a pass. I don't need to do anything. I don't need to do anything. I don't need to do anything. And the router's not doing anything. It's still passing that along to the CPU. The CPU is interpreting that instead of an idle cycle as an active cycle. Okay? So what we're doing is we're basically telling the CPU of our system that these are actual, how to identify idle cycles of the routers. Okay? So that it too does not pass them through any type of CPU process, and it will lower our CPU usage. Now, that's a really long explanation to say right click and hit idle PC. Oh, please select one router. Fine. R1. The good thing about this is you only have to do it to one because each of these routers uses the same iOS, so they're identical. I don't need to do it 3 times. I only need to do it once. GNS3 is smart enough now, they'll interpret it. A few versions back, you had to do it to each router regardless if it was the same class or not. So it will take some time and identify that. And when you see these idle PC values pop up, what you want to do is, the better idle PC value is marked with an asterisk. You want to select the one with an asterisk. So number 8 right there. Best. Select it. Click OK. Go back. Boom. 1%, 0%. Now, not that big of a deal for an i7 per se, but if you're running a dual core and you're running multiple routers, that can jack up really fast. And I'm not even doing any processing on these things yet. I'm not calculating any routing tables. I'm not doing any Wireshark on it at all, where it's copying packets from one interface to another. Right? That's when it'll really kind of bounce up. Okay, so somebody asked me the other day how powerful of I think it was you, sir, how powerful a PC I need. Not very powerful. If you have an i3 or an i5, you're just fine. You'll be fine. Okay? Just make sure you do this step. Make sure you do this step. Yes, sir.
Where'd you go do that step?
Sorry?
Where'd you go do that step?
Where did I learn to do that step?
Where did you go?
I just selected a router, any router, right click, and go to idle PC and run that program. It'll take up 30 seconds, a minute, and it'll come up with a drop-down box. Okay, that's a hardware code. You drop that box down, you look for the one with an asterisk, you select it. If you don't get one with an asterisk, that's okay. Click cancel. Do it again. Alright, older versions of GNS3, I've had to do it maybe 4, 5, 7 times before I get one with an asterisk. It just depends on the CPU, sampling, and everything else. Okay, so don't get freaked out if you don't get an asterisk. Just keep trying.
RAM usage?
RAM usage is not bad. Okay,
Yeah, 4 gigs is what?
if you look at the processes, and I go to GNS3, actually the thing here is Dynamips. Okay, Dynamips, yes, you're absolutely right, it's a memory hog. It's taking all of 286 meg. Whoop-de-doo. Firefox is just underneath that.
Yeah. I closed Firefox and it helped a lot.
Yeah. Good call. Alright, so that's kind of the how-to for GNS3. We'll get into more of this later on. Once you're done, you can click Save Project. It'll save your configs again. Right? And then I can just quit. I don't have to worry about it. I can just stop all the nodes, everything else. If I go to, and here's the critical check, everybody. If I go to temp, I should have that project that I saved. If I open that, and then I go into the config file, there's my configuration. I open that. There it is. Not very much is configured, because I didn't do anything with interfaces or anything else. I didn't do a write memory on anything, but if I had, it would have been saved there. Okay? We'll get into more GNS3 on how to save the files and save the configuration and boot it up to where you don't have to do a lot of file manipulation next time around. Things that I have to make sure is working. Okay? And a couple things that you can do to manipulate your devices with GNS3. First off, I'm going to bring up a command prompt. I'm going to look at my VMware interfaces. Okay?
Now this is assuming you've already installed workstation or player.
Yep. Player will give you the default VMware Net 1 and VMware Net 8. Workstation will give you the network editor. Thank you. That you can create your own. And I'll do that because I haven't created one. And I'll show you how you can manipulate it and push stuff back and forth and where you go wrong and everything else. Some caveats that you have to take into consideration. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up my VMware network editor. That I don't have. Okay, so I have Player on here. I have not installed Workstation. That's fine. That's fine. So,
Do you want to have it?
huh?
Do you need a computer that has it?
Nah. This will work fine. Because there's another trick that you can do. So my VM Network 8 adapter is set to 192.168.217. That's on my VMnet 1. Okay, so what's my VMnet 1 set to? VMnet 1 is set to 253.1. So if I bring up my adapter settings, and I look at VMnet 1, properties. Okay, that's where my IP address is set for. So to change it, let's just take a quick look at what it's got to be. Little diagram. So 1.0, and I think R1 is going to be like 1.1.
Here's 1.30.
I'm sorry?
Here's 1.30.
What it was.
Yeah, it's 1.3.
1.3, thank you. That makes sense. If I make my default gateway 168.1.1,
1, yeah.
don't worry about DNS. Okay, close. Alright. Now, let's just concentrate on this connection here. So this is VMware Net 1. If I go back, and I look at my VM Net 1 interface. You can see that I changed it. It is now 1.3. Everybody follow me on how I did that. I went into the adapter, I changed the IP address. If you don't know how to go into your Windows adapter and change an IP address,
Why are you here?
basically. Okay, that should be like that CIS 101-A for advanced. Okay, so now I'm going to go into R1. Right click, go to my console. So I need to go into my fast Ethernet interface. Alright, if I don't remember what my fast Ethernet interface is, I can see right there it's F00. I just need to throw my cursor over it. So if I go into global configuration mode, interface fast Ethernet 00, IP add 192.168.1.1/24 and turn it on. Bing, bing, bing. I write that to memory. And then ping 192.168.1.1, which is my interface. Bring that up real quick, sorry, can't see it. And then, hopefully, maybe so, maybe no. It's not pinging 1.3. Not pinging 1.3. Myself, and I can ping that router. It's kind of weird. The router cannot. Oh, I know. Hang on. Kind of an important step here. Network. Oh, you're not going to let me.
What are you trying to do?
I got to turn this off. But I'm not a local admin on this guy. Okay. So. Come in here, may allow me to, I just want to allow ICMP. These are programs.
He's all like a baby sleep.
I did, but it's not sending, it's sending an ICMP packet. This is why I hate Windows. Program, change locations, and settings. Okay. Inbound rules. New rule.
So we don't want you at a new rule, but I won't let you.
Isn't that retarded? Custom rule. service. Customize. Oh, it's a service. Dang it. It's only worried about protocols and ports. Here we go. Protocol. There we go. ICMP.
Might not be as retarded as you thought.
See, I get specific. So let's just say I want to do. I'll do all ICMP just for now. Protocol, local port, all remote, all. Next. Any IP address, testing purposes. Allow the connection. Domain, private, public. Apply it, name, ICMP, any. So now, watch it not work still on the test. And it works. Anyway, so I had to shut down my Windows firewall in order for that to come about. That's a typical, oh, I missed this moment if you don't do that. Now the easy way is just to drop the firewall altogether, but you know, even though they locked my laptop down here, I was still able to put a specific rule into the firewall. Okay, so that side is fine. Let's do this side. So on this side, this is where it gets a little tricky. It's a little tricky because I have this set up to my my Ethernet connection, which my Ethernet connection is set for a specific IP off of here. So, a couple things I can do. I can either A, change this connection, or B, I can put this router onto the network bridged from my Ethernet connection. Okay? If I do that, well, regardless of whatever I do, I got to do some specific routing within Windows to get it to work. And I'm gonna do this. I'm actually gonna do a. Look at my interfaces here real quick. Hit command. Hang on. This is in your the link that I set up on the first night of class. You have to go to the hardware wizard. I'm trying to remember what the command is and the command line. hdwwiz.exe. So here's what I gotta do. I've got to actually go into a command prompt as admin. And I'm wondering if I can do that. Right click run as administrator. Yeah, good. So, and then hdwwiz. Bingo. So, once I do hardware whiz, that's hdwwiz. Click next. Install hardware that I manually selected from a list. So I'm going to do a Microsoft loopback adapter. And we want to look for network adapters. Next. And then we want to look for the Microsoft, right here, and the loopback adapter, right there. Everybody follow how I did that. Okay, good. Next, install it, and finish. And woo, you know you got it working when that pops up. So I'm just going to go ahead and make it a work network. Fine. Now, here's the problem when you do that. You have to reboot, which for lack of time, I'm not going to reboot right now. And you will now see that I have a local area network connection 3. It's trying to identify it. That is my loopback adapter.
This is how you breach the connection.
One of the ways you can. So I can go here, I can go into properties, I can go to IPv4, and now I can give this adapter the IP address of that PC from the PDF, which is 3.3. Yes? I look on the chart. 3.1 is that PCC, yeah, 3.3. So, I go back here. I go to that 192.168.3.3. Default gateway, 192.168.3.1, which will be my router. You click OK. Leave me alone, no work. So I'm using GNS3. But it's still going through and saying identifying because it's not connected. I have to come to GNS3, right click. I'm going to have to disconnect this guy. Then I can configure it. I need to delete that connection. And then, yeah, the problem is it's not going to see it until I reboot.
No. We'll just assume you did.
Yeah, we'll assume I did it, reconnect it, and then I can get that connection to that router. I IP that router, of course. And then I do all the routing in between, and I can go from each logical interface to each logical interface. Everybody understand that concept?
How, for loopback, I assume the loopback is just that you go out and then come back around to the piece itself. You're using it to communicate.
I'm using it to communicate with the router,
Okay.
right? So here's where I've got to do a little bit of Windows magic, okay? On my Windows box, I've got to set up some routes. So my default gateway is going out, my normal routing default gateway is going to default to my Ethernet connection, okay? That's how Windows works. It'll default to the first IP interface it comes up, and it will prefer DHCP over a static IP address, I believe. You can go into your Windows operating system and you can set up static routes. And you can tell it, okay, if I want to route this direction, go that way. If I want to route that direction, go this way. This gets a little convoluted. This gets a lot convoluted when you're using your VMnet adapters through different paths in GNS3. So if you want to set up your PC on one path, and if you want to make this, since I made it VMnet 1, right? If I want to make, I made this .3, and he's .1, I can make my VMnet adapter, say like .2, and then I spin up an actual VM, say a VMware player, and I use that to route in that direction. And then on my home adapter, my loopback adapter, I route these networks over here to this gateway address. Okay, so there's a little bit of routing magic that you have to do within Windows since you're using so many different virtual devices. Since you're using so many virtual devices that you have to kind of keep in mind. Okay? I'll try to help you out with that here tonight or through email, whatever. But that's how it works in, concept. So I would actually try to put a VM, spin up a VM on this instead, okay, and connect them to the network there. You can keep your loopback adapter here; it'll work. You've got to do some Microsoft routes. So, for example, on R1, that LAN network is 192.168.1.x. I come into my system. I add a TCP/IP route to the Windows routing table. Really simple. Route, add, destination network, destination mask, destination mask, default gateway. Just exactly like you do in a router, except you have a couple of additional parameters there. You have add and you have mask. So if I wanted to route the 192.168.1.1 network, okay, I would do route add 192.168.1.0 mask class C and the gateway 192.168.3.1. Done. Now, also keep in mind, if you're adding routes, you've got to be in a command shell running as administrator. Otherwise it won't work. Okay, so that's how you add a static route in there. So now if I go back and I ping, it's going to fail where it worked before. Does anybody know? Oh, okay. It failed at first and then it picked it up because it looked for the route and then it defaulted back to its interface, its own interface. So this is where the VM really comes in handy. You can take that one IP off of the other VM net. So when doing all this virtual routing within one simulation, things can get muddled really quick, as you can see. Okay? So please keep that in mind. If you want, you can again do this in Packet Tracer. Although I want you to get used to GNS3, and I want your configuration files. And here's a little clue. I won't know if your configuration files are coming from GNS3 or packet tracer. So if you get stuck on one, you can use the other one. I don't mind.